In this video, we're going to talk about text and maybe some other objects and how to make them a bit more bold in case they're too thin. So if I came over here to the text tool and I clicked here and started typing in a date, so let's just say December 13th, 1947. If I were trying to match dates that were already on a stone and perhaps they were too thick, there are some different things that you can do. So once you've got text created, if you look up here, there's a bold, italic, and underlined option. Depending on the font, you may or may not have a bold option. Most of the Monument fonts are not going to have a bold option. If we went with something like Arial, you'll see there's an Arial, narrow, bold, or unbold version. So depending on the font, you can definitely go with a bold version that way. But that's font specific, and what it actually is doing is going from one font to the other, so they've created a bold version of that specific font. So instead, if we went, let's say, to the Monument Lettering Center fonts and went with a Roman hand-cut condensed. So if this were the font that you were trying to use, but perhaps it's a little bit too thin, there are a couple different ways to do it. So I'll show you three different ways. So I'm just going to make a copy of this. I'm holding Control while I'm dragging up to keep it in line with the rest, and then I'm just hitting the right mouse button to make a copy every time. And that way we've got three different versions here. So the quickest and easiest way to make something bold is to click on it and hit my bold object button, which will contour the selection to a set size every time you hit the B. The downside to this is that right now this is editable text, so with the text tool I can come and click and swipe and change, and you've also got different options for being able to mess with text with open type features and that sort of stuff. So if you can keep it as text, that's usually the best idea, but if you just need to be quick and make it bold, you can click on this B button right here, and every time you click on that, so I just did it one time, if I do it again, it's going to make it a little bit more bold every time I click on it. If I hold Control and click on the bold object button, it gives me the amount that it's going to bold it every time that I click on that button. So the downside to doing it this way, even though it's nice and fast, is if I hit V to go to the wireframe, you'll see that it's ready to cut and there's no problems there, but it's not editable text anymore, so I can't just click on it and edit it. In order to edit it now, you'd have to use your shape tool and manually come in here and grab nodes and that sort of stuff in order to move things around. So that's the downside, is if you use the bold object button, then it's going to convert your text to curves in order to do so. But it is fast, so oftentimes I'll use it if I need to do something quick. Another thing that you can do, if I back up here, I'll just undo a couple times with Control Z, is you can make a copy. So if I just hit Control C and then Control V, it'll copy and paste right on top of itself, or you can just hit the plus sign on a numeric keypad. If you've got a numeric keypad, that'll make a duplicate right on top of it. And then we could just hit the bold button a couple times, and that way you can see the difference between the original one and then the one that we're going to have as the bolded version. That way, in case you really needed to, you can go ahead and edit this and just rebold it, and then whenever you've got it set the way that you want it to be done, this is the version that you would cut. So different ways of doing that. I'll go ahead and erase that just so we can see the difference later on. The next way is if we click on this and come over here, there's what's called the contour tool. So a contour is basically another outline around an object at a set offset distance. And so right now I've got my offset distance at 0.23 inches, and then you've got options here for whether you want to go to the center of your object, if you want to go just to the inside, or if you want to go to the outside. In this particular case, we'd want to do an outside contour, and we don't want to do 0.23 inches. That's just too large. So before, with the other tool, we had 0.005 inches as our bold option. So you can see if we do that, it's going to bold it by 0.005 inches. You've also got your colors here for how you want it to look when it's created, whether you want an outline color, fill color, that sort of stuff, so that it looks the same. The plus side to using contours is that it is just applying an effect to your existing text. So if I came in here and changed this to April instead of December, it will, as soon as I stop editing my text, it will reapply that contour. And so in order to get back to that contour, I just click on it here, and I can change that size too. So every time, if I wanted to, I could just click this up arrow to make it a little bit bolder, a little bit more, or I can give it a certain amount that I want it to go to every time. The bold object button is actually doing these exact same steps. It's doing an outside contour, but then what it does is it breaks apart that contour from the original object, and then it deletes the original object, where the contour tool doesn't do those further steps. So if I hit V to go to wireframe, you'll see that we've actually got the original inside text there, and every time we click on this, you're going to see how it makes it bigger. It just gives you that outline around it. So in order to make this cuttable, when it comes time to getting it ready to cut, then you come up to Object, and you'd have to say Break Contour Group Apart, and then you come in and grab your text and hit Delete, and then that will be cuttable, instead of double cutting the inside and outside of those letters. So it's just a couple extra steps that it takes, but it does give you more control using the contour tool. The whole idea of the bold object is just to make it faster, to contour faster. So the last option is using what are called outlines. Outlines historically used to just be pretty much where, if we look at the wireframe of this, so this line here, giving it an outline would go to the outside of that line to make it thick by a certain amount. That way, if we had, for instance, the text were to be filled in like this, we could right click on it and give it an outline, and so you can see how that outline, if I've got my mouse here and I'll hit V again, you'll see that the outline is actually centered on that particular outline. So the thicker I go on my outline, if I come down here, you'll see it's just a hairline. You can double click on this, and you can choose how thick you want that outline to be. So let's just say 0.1 inches or 0.125 inches, something like that. And in the past, it would pretty much just, be a center outline. In recent versions of CorelDRAW, though, you can actually choose whether you want it to be centered, outside, or inside. So if I were to choose a outside outline instead, then it's going to act almost the exact same way as your contour tool does. Once again, that's too thick of an outline, so if I changed it down to 0.005, then you'll see what happens. This part here, where it's coming to a straight line across, that's called a miter limit. And so you can see right here where there's a miter limit of 45 degrees. If you change that miter limit to something higher or something smaller, then you'll see what happens is you end up telling it that it can come to a point or not, or whether it just has to go to 45 degrees or a certain angle. So that's what the miter limit does. You've also got options with how you want your corners to look, whether you want them to be rounded or beveled, and then what kind of line caps you have. So those are all options for doing an outline. The thing with outlines as well is that they are just an effect being applied to the text. So once again, if I were to change this text to April, the outline is going to stick with it. When it comes time to getting this ready to cut, same thing applies. You'd have to come up to Object and say Convert Outline to Object. And what that does is it then converts your outline to an object that you can use to cut with. If I pull this away, though, what you'll see is that the outline has actually got the original shape there. So it's got the original shape plus the outline that we created. So if we wanted to get this ready to cut, what I usually do is I will just take all of those things, select them all at the same time, and then just hit W to weld. And when you hit W to weld, it's going to weld your original to the new outline, and it will then get rid of those inside lines for you. But I normally wouldn't do that until I'm ready to cut, because then you're going to lose your original text and that sort of stuff. So I will normally, if I'm doing this and getting it ready to cut, I will normally make a copy of it or go to the plot page and do my changes there, and then get it ready to weld on the plot page. That way I've still got my editable text. But those are three different ways of getting text to be more bold. The same thing applies with objects. You can do the same thing with objects or designs. So if I were to import, for instance, design number 3200, it comes in as a grouped object of different pieces. So I would have to ungroup it all and combine it first. But once it's combined, then I can just hit this B, and every time I click on that, it's just going to make it a little bit more bold. And you can do the same thing with contours and with outlines, but you have to remember to break things apart or convert the outlines to curves and then do your welding and stuff. So it's a lot easier to do the bold object if that's what you're trying to accomplish. And on objects, you don't have to worry about the fact that it's not editable text anymore, as objects are always just curves anyway, for the most part. So hopefully that's helpful in getting things a little bit more bold, and shows you the power of using contours or outlines for customizability as opposed to the bold object option, which just gives you the quick and easy way of doing it. So hopefully that helps.